That was what this is all about, like the shift, how hard it is for sports to take data and into consideration. And I think Roderick will have a lot to say about that. He's going to talk about strategies used by top athletes, such as personalized recovery, mental resilience, and data-driven performance. And it's really being embraced by teams like the Steelers that feel like that gives them an edge. And what I'm really anxious for now, I think you could tell by looking at me, I'm not an elite athlete, but I do enjoy it, and I've seen some of these things in action. And what I'm really interested in, and I think you would be too, to see how all this sports science can help lay people like us to achieve longevity, resilience, and well-being. So, Roderick, we're really looking forward to your insights and real-world examples. Thank you.
All right, how's everybody doing? So I figured out why I was after lunch. Because I was like, when I was talking to Katie and Donna, they said, okay, you'll be at 12:30 right after lunch. And I'm like, dang, that's a hard group after lunch. You eat lunch, you're comfortable, you're feeling good. You know, you need that second win. So I think because of my background, strength and conditioning, then I have to motivate you after lunch. So that's what I have to do, is try to motivate you. But first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you. I want to take a few minutes and kind of talk about some things I researched for this topic, but then also just talk about what we do at the Pittsburgh Steelers or what guys do in various professional sports. And so first thing, just to tell you a little about me, grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. And so when I say I grew up in Nashville, everybody's like, oh, wow, Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm like, you know, it was different then. I finished high school in 92, so it was before the Titans arrived, before the Preds. It was all about country music. It was Charlie Pride and Dolly Parton and, you know, various country music artists. So it was a great time growing up in Nashville. Then from there, went to Morehouse College, played football. Actually, in high school, played football. You could probably tell, was also on the track team, so I wasn't a sprinter, as you can probably tell. So I was a thrower, and same thing in college, so it progressed. And so then after Morehouse, went to University of Tennessee, got a master's in human performance and sports psychology. Then from there, ended up working in the weight room. So I was a grad assistant there, ended up spending 10 years there total. We won a national championship, you know, had many guys drafted, football, basketball, various sports. Then at the University of Tennessee, I left there in 2007, went to Florida International, which is in Miami, became the head strength coach there. So when I get to FIU, we had the worst football program in America. So we had like a 20-game losing streak. When I got there, we continued that losing streak, but then that last game in 2007, we won. We won against North Texas. It was at the Orange Bowl, and ironically, that year the Orange Bowl was our home field because our field was under construction. So we played the University of Miami at home, but it was against them. They won, but you know, we were the last college football team to have a victory in the Orange Bowl. So that's a little trivia if you ever get that question. So you've got it from me. After that, we did very well. The program grew, got better, went to the first bowl game, went to back-to-back bowl games, had the first winning season in program history. So everything's great. Into 2011 season, everything's good. My head coach, Mario Cristobal, is down at the University of Miami. He brings me to his office. He says, hey, I've got an opportunity to go to the University of Pittsburgh. If I go, will you go with me? I was like, absolutely, coach. I said, my wife's from Pittsburgh. We've never lived near family. I'm there. He said, all right, bet. 2 weeks later, he fires me. And I'm like, coach, what happened? And he said, well, you know, you were up for a Kansas job. You were up for IMG. I thought you were getting bigger in the program. I was like, well, 2 weeks ago, we talked about going to Pittsburgh. What happened? And it was just like, hey, I wanted to move in a different direction. So then from there, ended up in sales. And I was like, wow, sales? I'm not a salesman. But then I thought about it. I was like, wait a minute. As a strength coach, you're a salesman. You're selling your program to the athletes. You're selling your program to the parents. You're selling your program to the coaches. So was in sales for Cybex equipment company. Then from there, went to a startup called Catapult. So Catapult, Australian-based company, Actually sold Catapult to the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 2012. Sold Catapult to West Virginia University football in 2013. Sold Catapult to University of Pittsburgh. So we did well. Company grew. I left there and went to Sparta Science, which is a force plate company in California, so in the Silicon Valley. Spent a year there, was VP of North America, Europe, then went to another Australian-based company called Vol Performance. So with Vol Performance, they have devices that measures eccentric hamstring strength. They have force plates. They have force frames which measure different joints in your body to produce newtons of force and having asymmetry to figure out what asymmetries you have in order to address those so then you can mitigate, injury. And so then from there, one of my athletes from the University of Tennessee called me up one day and said, "Hey, coach, I'm about to be the head strength coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Will you come?" I was like, "Absolutely." I said, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Well, I want you to run the sports technology and also be an assistant strength coach." And I said, "All right, that's cool." He said, "Would you be bothered by that?" I was like, "No, not at all." I said, "It's the NFL's opportunity to work in the NFL." He said, "Because look, one thing I remember when I was an athlete at University of Tennessee, so he was a walk-on for us. He said, you always treated me the same. It didn't matter because I wasn't on scholarship. You always treated me the same, and I remembered that. So that's how I entered in the NFL. Then from there, a couple years later, our current head strength coach at Pittsburgh, Phil Matus, came to Atlanta, spent a day there, called me a year later, said, "Hey, I'm getting a head job at Pittsburgh. Will you come to Pittsburgh?" So that's how I ended up at Pittsburgh. So just kind of brief on how things come full circle. And one thing I want to take away or provide for you, even if you don't learn anything from this longevity playbook, but one thing I want you to take away is always treat people with respect. And every day is an interview. Every day is an interview. It doesn't matter who you meet, who you speak to, if they're further along in your career or not. Every day is an interview. I had no idea a former athlete of mine would ask me to come join him at an NFL team. So let's talk about longevity in elite sports. So first of all, we're all athletes. Some are more elite than others, but we're all athletes. And so when we talk about Built to Last, the playbook for longevity from elite performance, I want to talk about first back in the 1900s. So we go to the 1900s. Hopefully you can see this. But to the left, women have a longer lifespan than men. And that's still the same today. And so back then in 1900, the time span, the longevity was 48.3 years for women, 46.3 years for men. Now, if we fast forward, we go to 2023. So if you look at men and women, women still live longer than men. 81.1 years compared to 75.8. So the gap has increased. And this is not research-based, it's purely anecdotal, my reason why I think women live longer than men. So I know, being married, my wife will ask me certain things to do. All right, say we want to rearrange a room, we move some furniture, then I'm going to do the most masculine, brutal type thing in order to move it. So I'm going to pick it up and move it. When she's like, "What are you doing?" So I'm moving the furniture. So we have furniture slides. So she's like, "All right, well, you use the furniture slides." I think because women are more efficient and smarter than men, that's why they live longer. So that's just my anecdotal piece. Next, what is longevity? I know there's some boos. I'm sorry, man. I lose my card. I know that. The duration of an individual's life, that is longevity. Secondly, the ability to maintain good physical, cognitive, and social functioning throughout one's lifespan. Now, when you compare this to elite sport, what is longevity in elite sport? Very similar. It's the duration of an athlete's playing career. Secondly, it's the ability to maintain physical health, mental toughness, as well as relationship throughout one's playing career. So when you're in elite sport, you've got to have peak performance from a physical standpoint, a mental standpoint, as well as having those relationships. You have to be a good teammate, a good person in the locker room, because otherwise your career won't continue. If you look at an athlete like Cam Hayward, he's been at Pittsburgh Steelers for 15 years. Coming in as a rookie, he had guys he looked up to. So now the guys that are here are looking up to him. And there's things he does, and we'll mention later, that others do around various leagues in order to keep and maintain that high level of functioning in elite sport. So factors that influence longevity playbook. First is genetics, second environment, and then lastly lifestyle. So by a quick show of hands, how many people think genetics is a major factor in your longevity. Do you think it's more than 50% apply to that? No, not really, a little. One thing when I was doing research for this and talking about genetics, the common perception is that genetics significantly influence longevity. Now, you're a smart group, so you know that's not the case. You kind of know where I'm going. So, genetics only accounts for 20 to 30% of one's expected lifetime. So, the greater influence is from the environment as well as your lifestyle. And then, more importantly, effects of genetics become more pronounced around the age of 60. So, I'm on a downhill slope to 60. So, I'm like, man, I hope my lifestyle, my other choices were good prior to hitting 60, because once 60 and genetics hit, then that's a whole nother animal. And so now, environment and lifestyle play a more critical role at a younger age. So for all you younger folks, make sure your environment, your lifestyle is on point, because that is a key in determining longevity as you progress in age. Next, we'll talk about environment. So environment, very simple. You know, everybody thinks, all right, having hygienic living conditions, that's something everybody should have. Correct. It should, but there's certain circumstances, whether it's socioeconomic or what have you, where they may not have a proper waste disposal. They may not have access to clean water. Secondly, if you look at your access to health care, annual checkups are harder if you're in a more rural location. You may not be as attentive in going to the doctor because you live in a rural location, or you just may not have the ability to get to a location to seek care on a consistent basis. Lastly, one thing that was very interesting is lifestyle. We all know lifestyle is important in longevity, but there was a research by this guy named Dan Butner. So what he did, he found out there were blue zones, or geographic areas where people have a low rates of chronic disease and live longer than anyone else. Now, these next 5 blue zones we'll go over doesn't mean those are the only blue zones here in the world. But when Dan Butner studied areas where people lived exceptionally long lives, these were the areas he found. First was Okinawa, Japan, Icaria, Greece, Aguastra, Sardinia, Loma Linda, California, and the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. And so what he found was that their diet, nutrition, and physical activity were all contributed to their longevity. So as we dig a little deeper with our factors in longevity for our playbook, so specific habits in general. First, physical activity. So if you look at the one group in the blue zone, the people of Nicoya Peninsula, they regularly perform physical jobs into old age. So no matter how young, how old they are, they continue to have physical, laborious type jobs. Secondly, healthy diet. We always know, all right, let's talk about a healthy diet. Island of Icaria, where people eat a Mediterranean diet rich in olive oil, red wine, and homegrown vegetables. They don't eat processed meats. They are strictly more true whole food type of eaters. Stress management. Okinawa is home of the world's oldest women. They practice Tai Chi. So that's a great point. Not only is it stress management, it's also mental clarity, but then also physical activity. Next, with social connections. The Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California, live in tight-knit communities. As we saw when you guys voted earlier on the slide right before lunch, community, your relationships, your connections were the top on the list. And the same thing is essential for habits or sustaining longevity, having a tight-knit community and having those social connections. Good sleep hygiene. We always hear about sleep. You know, you need 8 hours of sleep. Now, research now, you see a lot of successful people that don't get 8 hours of sleep. They get 4, 5, 6 hours. But from what Dan Butner found with these groups around the world was that having 7 hours of sleep was ideal. Also, they were encouraged each other to take naps. So that was important to them as far as their sleep hygiene. Now, you can go deeper down a rabbit hole as far as sleep hygiene because there's pillows that go into effect. We could talk about, besides pillows, the temperature of your room. We can talk about the blue light, red light. There's different things you can use to counteract the blue light. But good sleep hygiene is important. And then avoiding bad habits. So blue zone inhabitants don't exercise purposefully, but their activity is built into their daily lives through gardening, walking, cooking, and other daily chores. Next, we look at superstars such as CeeDee Lamb. So he spends over $1 million a year on body maintenance. So with CeeDee, he's a receiver, obviously, but Complex Sports revealed that he spends over $1 million on his body maintenance. So he spends things on ice baths, which also people use cryotherapy, similar. Red light therapy, hyperbaric chambers, where hyperbaric chambers are chambers where it gives you 100% of oxygen so the blood can carry that to your tissues, so it aids in recovery. There's other things he used. If you go beyond CeeDee, we talk about LeBron. He spends similar, over $1.5 million. And so one thing he is important for him is the recovery aspect. So utilizing various methods for recovery. We talk about hyperbaric chambers, cryotherapy. Those can be bought on Amazon. I mean, now, if you look at LeBron James, he's a millionaire. He's probably a billionaire, actually. And so with LeBron, he can afford those different tools. We, as athletes, not as elite as LeBron, but we can afford those same tools. There's tools available that we can use very similar to give those same effects as LeBron. So if you think of an ice bath, you don't have to have a cryo chamber. You can just put ice in a tub with cold water. You have an ice bath. Look at hyperbaric chambers. They're sold, like I said. Amazon, maybe even Costco. And then a Normatec compression boots. Normatec was probably one of the first companies. I don't know if you've seen a compression boot, but what it is, machine that inflates. There's different pieces where you can use for your legs, your upper body, different areas of your body that compress and basically give you like a massage feeling. There's another product called Game Ready, which is similar to Normatec, but now it's cold therapy, but still compression, but cold therapy. So in addition to the recovery, his training, LeBron is serious about his training regimen, his nutrition, his sleep, and then as far as other practices, he engaged in biohacking techniques like ice baths we talked about earlier and stretches. In addition to that, many of you have seen the regulatory type of fashion some teams will employ with their athletes as far as resting their guys. They'll do that based upon either GPS data, they'll do it based upon LPS data, or even some internal intrinsic type metrics that you can use from heart rate variability. So there's different tools you can use to help you in that respect. I saw earlier, I think there was an ad for Aura Ring. Aura Ring is another tool a lot of athletes use. In the NFL, they provide that for the athletes for them. All they have to do is just give, I think, one social media post, maybe a year, and they get a free Aura Ring. Similarly to sleep comfort, the Sleep Number bed, that's provided for those guys free of charge. You just order it, it gets sent to your house, it's a done deal. So they have tools that are built in to benefit for the guys based upon the NFL PA, so the Players Association. But the habits for longevity in elite sport are something we all can do. It's not a mystical, magical type of method. It can be very basic, but with that basic type of approach, it can be very beneficial to all of us. Next, we'll talk about Russell. Russell's a great guy. We had him last year, obviously, at the Steelers. He spends $1 million on his body. I remember when he arrived here in Pittsburgh last year, he strained his calf in camp during the conditioning test. So, ironically, we had talked about Russell only doing like so many reps, but he was adamant that he wanted to do all the reps. So his last rep is where he strained his calf. However, he brought in his PT. His PT worked with our medical team. They came up with a plan on how to bring back Russell in a safe, effective, efficient manner. Now, a lot of guys don't have their own PT. So this is one of the first instances, especially the Pittsburgh Steelers, where you had to interact with an athlete's PT, which is fine. I think if you have that opportunity, you have that ability to employ someone on your team, there's no reason why we shouldn't work with your person in order to speed you up, because a lot of times they may spend more time with that athlete than we will. If you look at us in the offseason, we started OTAs today, which is organized training activities. And so with OTAs, you have 9 weeks of voluntary work. Guys can come in if they want to, or they don't have to come in. But once camp hits, we have the guys from camp, which is end of July, to hopefully in February. So that's 4, 5, 6 months that we have our guys. So when we train in season, that's our largest training block. So meaning for us to develop our guys, we have to kind of develop them in season, because out of season, off season, you rarely see the guys from postseason, which is in February, to right here when we start up OTAs. So with Russell, same thing, extensive recovery. is his dedicated team, like I talked about, trainers, physical therapists, strength and conditioning. He has a weight room in his house, various places in Denver, here, California. Same type of equipment, hyperbaric chambers. He focuses on his mental game, his dietary habits, balanced fitness, and long-term goals, not only for him, but also for his family. So he employs almost twice as many members of his performance team than, say, like C.D. Lamb, because he's married to Sierra. And so he does that for her as well as for himself. So to kind of close this up, brief summary. When we talk about longevity, don't think of longevity as just something that can be attained by elite athletes. Longevity can be attained by all of us in this room, by physical activity, being intentional in physical activity, having a healthy diet, non-processed protein, vegetable, nuts. In addition to healthy diet, stress management, just breathing, sitting there, breathing, taking deep breaths, inhale, exhale, breathing properly, diaphragmatically will help with your stress. Social connections help with your stress. Now, sometimes your social connections can aid in your stress, but if you have the right social connections, they will help in your stress. Your friends, your community. Good sleep hygiene also helps with stress management. Good sleep hygiene also helps with your diet. Lastly, avoiding bad habits. No compromises there. And so one thing just to kind of leave you with is that acknowledge the people that have helped me, throughout my life, my wife, my kids at the top, coaches I've coached with at Tennessee, Dr. Thomas Stallworth, who gave me an opportunity in the NFL, then my assistants at FIU, the various companies I work with, Dr. Maroon, Katie Farmer, Donna Peduto. I definitely appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak in front of you guys. And I'll tell you one thing. I guess I was talking to Katie before, and she was asking me about eating lunch, and I was like, Katie, I'm good. I usually try not to eat lunch or breakfast because back in 2018 when I was traveling a lot for work, I was coming back from Australia, and I remember walking up this jet bridge, and I was like, man, I'm winded. Why am I winded? This doesn't make any sense. So I get home, I get on the scale, I was 400 pounds. And I was like, oh, man, there's no way. And so then that next day, changed my diet, started fasting. As a result, lost 110 pounds in 5 months. And so with that, kept it off the last 5 years. And the goal is to reduce to get another 50 pounds, drop that. But really, it's not about the poundage. No, I appreciate that. It's not about the poundage, but it's more about what's best for you and your lifestyle. And so I'll leave the next slide. If you ever need to contact me, want to contact me, have any time, want to ask questions, my email address, my cell number is there. We can connect LinkedIn, what have you. But I can tell you about my journey, show you some pictures before and after. But it was simple, eating whole grains, eating, non-processed meats. And the one thing that helped me was fasting. I would fast 12 hours, then a month later, 16, 18, 20, even did like a 7-day fast one time. So I appreciate your time. I doubt if we have time for questions.
We do.
Okay.
We do.
Well, we have time for questions. Feel free to shoot any.
We'll come.
You even have the mic. All right, girl.
Oh, you prepared? I may be afraid. Questions, you already have a mic.
So what do you think are the most important exercises for those who are mature?
I'll say the most important, walking.
Walking.
Walking at an incline, walking up steps, declining steps, descending steps, because not only going up, more cardio effect, heart rate, but then going down, we have to learn as time progresses to continue to decelerate. So to kind of put in like elite sports, where you have ACL injuries, is usually because of, especially non-contact, is because of deceleration. The athlete can't handle the deceleration of his or her body. And so a lot of times it's because the quad is stronger, so much stronger than the hamstring. So you really want to focus on that posterior chain. So by going up steps, but also going down steps, will help with your balance. It will help with just your overall conditioning. But walking in general is the best exercise for weight loss, for various things.
Thank you again for your talk. I heard you mention cryotherapy and cold as a method of healing and overall longevity. What role might heat play in these things?
Heat is definitely an important role as well. We have a sauna, we have a steam room, and so with heat can help you to eliminate a lot of sickness, illnesses you may have, can assist with breathing, can lower your blood pressure. There's various techniques by using heat, and even also from a rehab standpoint, we talk about a healing. A lot of times guys will contrast between hot and cold. And so contrasting that hot and cold would help facilitate those, especially those acute soft tissue injuries that you could occur from an elite level, but then also just everyday life. You know, you can wake up and like, man, my back hurts. Why does my back hurt? You know, so then applying heat or applying cold will help you to remedy those daily aches and pains. So that's a great question. So heat is definitely as important as cold. Yes, sir.
Here we go. What role is two parts. First part, what role is predictive analytics playing in injury prevention? It sounds like you mentioned some things with Russell, and hey, so I'd love to understand kind of your methodology and what you all are doing there, what tools you're using. And the second part is, we're 60 hours from the draft. Who's going to be our quarterback next year?
Let's answer the second question first. You look like you could play quarterback, so come on. So you may be our quarterback. Secondly, well, to go back to the first question, is we'll use various technologies. So one I spoke about earlier was Catapult, was GPS technology. And so we'll use the GPS technology to track their speed, their accelerations, their decelerations, their impacts, their high-speed distance, their total yardage, their player load, which is like an accumulation of work. And so we'll look at that data and see where guys are, say, out of the norm. And so we have a receiver. He's always way high in load and accumulation work. His speed, he hits his 90% or higher in speed. And having a high speed is not a bad thing, because in season we want our guys to hit, especially our skill and our combo guys, to hit 90% of their max velocity every week. And the reason is, if you don't get that high speed exposure during the week, but then all of a sudden have to hit it on Sunday, then you have a greater chance of a soft tissue injury. And so, you know, we educate our guys. We got to educate them every day, because we'll have guys that come in from, you know, various teams, colleges, rookies, whatever. And there's one guy in particular, I'm like, in Atlanta, I was talking to him, prominent defensive player for us. I was like, hey, you got to hit your 90%. You haven't hit your 90% in a month. And he was just kind of blowing me off. I said, all right, something happens. I hope it doesn't, but we want to hit that 90%. So he didn't. Week later, tweaked his hamstring. After that, he was like, Coach, I'm starting hitting my 90%. Because they never had an issue prior to that. But the reason why he got lax in hitting his 90%, we had another vet that came in. That vet, 10 plus years, he was more of his role as a teammate on our team was more like, hey, I know when to practice, I know how to practice, I don't have to hit my 90%, I can kind of just glide. But he didn't need to glide, because this guy who sustained the injury was a younger athlete, like year 2 or 3. But he needed to keep hitting that 90%. And so another thing we'll use is Vault Performance. So we have a couple different products from Vault. One is the eccentric hamstring device called the NordBoard. And so if you measure the eccentric hamstring of an athlete or anyone in here, you can get how much force you pull from your left and your right leg. So we look at the asymmetry. We all have asymmetries, but we want the asymmetry to be under 10%, because a lot of times your asymmetry may be what makes you great as an athlete or elite as an athlete. So once we're over 10%, 10 to 15, we'll modify their workout to address that asymmetry. If it's over 15, we consider that red. So we use like a red, yellow, green. So red over 15%, all right, we've got to really focus on that single leg to make it stronger as your more dominant leg or your stronger leg. From 10 to 15 is yellow. So, all right, say one set of our posterior chain will be dedicated to that leg. If you're under 10%, you're okay. We're good. Another tool we use, force plates. We're Hawking Dynamic with the force plate. Similar thing, we'll perform a counter movement jump, which basically is a jump where your hands on your hips, you dip, drive, jump as high as you can. You can see how much force you apply eccentrically. So when you go down, also you can see how much force you apply concentrically right before you jump, as well as once you land onto the plate. So we can look at those different metrics and say, okay, hey, this right leg, he lands harder on his right leg than his left. Our punter currently, Cam, as you know, first game of the season last year tore his ACL because a teammate of his threw another guy into him. So it tore his ACL. But now we perform tests on the force plate. He's now asymmetrical, which is great. That's where we want him to be. And so he sees that, gives him confidence prior to going back to the field, because we talk about those different factors. Mental toughness a lot of times, or mental capacity is sometimes it's overlooked. It's beginning to be less overlooked now, but initially that's one thing that's overlooked, because physically you could be ready, but then mentally you could say, okay, I have doubts. And so that's key for sports psychologists, for your nutritionists, for everyone on our sports performance team to interact and work as a group. I think that was it. Anything else I missed besides quarterback? Quarterback. Okay. I'll get back with you. Text me Thursday. We'll talk.
We ran out of time for questions. I'm sure we could go on each day, but thank you so much for being so engaging, informative.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's wonderful.